You're about to hear a new story, but first subscribe and leave a like. It helps us grow. Where are you right now? The mare's scream pierced the autumn air just before Helena Ashford felt herself flying through space, the world spinning in a violent blur of rust-colored leaves and grey English sky. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the breath from her lungs, her riding habit tangling around her legs as she rolled through the undergrowth. Pain shot through her shoulder, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation burning in her chest. 23 years old, an accomplished rider since childhood, and she'd been thrown like a novice because her mind had wandered to the prison awaiting her, a loveless marriage to a man who looked at her the way one might appraise livestock. Damn it all, she muttered, struggling to sit up among the ferns. Her hair had come loose from its pins, dark waves tumbling around her shoulders, and somewhere in the fall she'd torn her glove. The distant sounds of the royal hunt echoed through Windsor Forest, horns, hounds, the thunder of hooves, but they were moving away from her. Good. She didn't want witnesses to this moment of weakness. Most ladies would call for help. The voice came from above her, deep and tinged with amusement. Helena's head snapped up. A man stood a few feet away, having apparently dismounted from a magnificent black stallion that now grazed peacefully nearby. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in hunting clothes that were clearly expensive, but worn with careless ease. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, grey as a winter storm, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Most gentlemen would offer assistance before making observations, she shot back, accepting that her pride was already in tatters. She tried to stand and gasped as her ankle protested. He moved quickly, kneeling beside her with surprising grace for a man his size. Your ankle? It's fine. It wasn't. But she'd be damned if she'd show weakness to a stranger, even one who looked at her as if she were the most fascinating thing he'd encountered in these woods. You're a terrible liar. His hands, strong, capable, carefully examined her boot. Nothing broken, I think. Badly twisted. You'll need to stay off it for a few days. He looked up at her, and she was struck by how handsome he was, in a way that seemed almost dangerous. Not the polished beauty of court dandies, but something raw. What sent you flying? That mare looked well trained. My thoughts were elsewhere. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Dangerous habit during a hunt. He stripped off his coat, revealing a fine linen shirt beneath, and fashioned it into a cushion, placing it behind her back so she could lean against a tree trunk more comfortably. The gesture was so unexpectedly gentle that Helena felt her throat tighten. Where were your thoughts if not on your riding? She should have demurred, changed the subject, remembered her manners. But something about this stranger, the way he looked at her, really looked at her as if her answer mattered, made the truth spill out. On my wedding, to a man 40 years my senior who wants a decorative wife to prove his new money can buy anything, including an Earl's daughter. My father's gambling debts are considerable, you see, and Lord Cunningham is very wealthy and very determined to climb the social ladder. I'm the price of my family's survival. The stranger's expression darkened. And you've accepted this. What choice do I have? Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is what we do, isn't it? We women of quality. We smile and curtsy and marry whoever will save our families from ruin, and we pretend we don't mind being traded like horses. At least horses get to run before they're sold. You don't strike me as someone who accepts cages easily. His voice had dropped lower, something in his tone making her heart beat faster. No, she admitted quietly. But I strike myself as someone who loves her father too much to let him end up in debtor's prison, while I cling to romantic notions about marrying for love. She met his eyes. Love is a luxury for those who can afford it, sir. The rest of us make do with duty. And if someone could afford it? If someone wanted to give it to you? The way he said it, so intense, so immediate, made Helena's breath catch. Then I would say they're speaking in fantasies. No one gives away love like charity. And even if they did, I'm already promised. She straightened despite the pain in her ankle, suddenly aware of how improper this all was, alone in the forest with a strange man, speaking of such intimate things. I should return to the hunt. My absence will be noted. Not yet. He didn't touch her, but something in his voice held her in place. Tell me your name. Lady Helena Ashford, daughter of the Earl of Whitmore. She studied him more carefully now, noting the quality of his clothes, the bearing that spoke of power and privilege. And you are? Someone who thinks you deserve better than Lord Cunningham. He stood, extending his hand to help her up. Someone who intends to see you again, Lady Helena. That would be most improper, Not Mr. He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to devastating. "Your Royal Highness, if we're being formal, but you may call me Edward." The world seemed to tilt again, though this time Helena was standing still. Edward Albert, Prince of Wales, the heir to the British throne, the man they called the Lion because of his reputation for volatile temper and fierce determination, the prince whose scandalous affair with a French duchess had nearly caused a diplomatic incident, and she had just unburdened her heart to him as if he were nobody at all. "Your Royal Highness, She tried to curtsy and nearly fell again. His hands caught her waist, steadying her, and the touch sent heat racing through her body. "Don't." His hands remained on her waist, his thumbs pressing gently against her ribcage through the fabric of her riding habit. "Don't retreat behind formality. Not after you've been so beautifully honest." He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell sandalwood and leather and something uniquely him. "I'm going to see you again, Lady Helena, and next time you won't want me to leave." Before she could respond, he'd lifted her onto her mare with easy strength, adjusting her seat with hands that lingered just a moment too long. He mounted his stallion in one fluid motion, looking every inch the prince now, commanding and magnificent. "Can you ride back, or shall I escort you?" "I can manage." Her voice came out shakier than she liked. "I'm sure you can. You strike me as someone who always manages." He gathered his reins, then paused. "One more thing, Lady Helena. That cage you think you're locked in? I'm very good at breaking cages." He rode away before she could answer, disappearing into the trees like something from a dream. Helena sat on her mare, trembling, her ankle throbbing, and her heart pounding for entirely different reasons. She should forget this encounter, should pray he'd forget it too, should focus on her duty to her family and her upcoming marriage to Lord Cunningham. But as she turned her horse toward the distant sounds of the hunt, she knew with terrible certainty that everything had just changed. The Prince of Wales had looked at her as if she were something precious, as if she mattered, and God help her, she wanted him to look at her that way again. 3 days later, London society was abuzz with the news that His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, had attended Lady Pemberton's ball, an event he would normally have ignored as beneath his interest. Helena heard the whispers from across the ballroom, standing beside William Cunningham as he discussed wool prices with a group of industrialists, treating her presence as decorative background. Her ankle still ached, carefully hidden beneath her ivory silk gown, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest when she finally saw Edward. He stood near the entrance, taller than most men in the room, wearing formal evening dress that made him look like a dark angel. A hush had fallen over the immediate area, guests bowing and curtsying, but his eyes, those storm-grey eyes, were scanning the crowd with predatory focus. When they found her, everything else seemed to disappear. Helena's breath stopped. He smiled slowly, deliberately, and began walking toward her through the crowd. People parted before him like water, conversations dying in his wake. She felt Cunningham stiffen beside her, his hand tightening possessively on her arm. "Your Royal Highness," Cunningham said, bowing stiffly when Edward stopped before them. "What an unexpected honor." "Lord Cunningham." Edward's voice was coolly polite, but his eyes never left Helena. "I hope you don't mind if I request the next dance with your fiancé, is it?" He said the word as if it tasted bitter. "I'm afraid Lady Helena's dance card is full." "Is it?" Edward finally looked at Cunningham, and there was something in that gaze that made the industrialist step back slightly. "Then I'm sure she can make room for her prince. Unless you're suggesting that wool prices are more important than royal requests." It was smoothly done, offering no opening for refusal without obvious offense. Cunningham's face reddened, but he released Helena's arm. "Of course not, Your Royal Highness." "Helena, you should be honored." Edward extended his hand, and Helena had no choice but to take it. The moment their fingers touched, electricity shot up her arm. He led her onto the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz, his hand settling on her waist with possessive certainty. "You're causing a scandal," she whispered as they began to move. "Everyone is watching. Let them watch." He pulled her closer than was strictly proper, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. 3 days and you've haunted every moment. Your Royal Highness, you mustn't say such things. Edward, say my name." "I can't." But she wanted to. God, she wanted to. "Can't or won't?" His thumb traced small circles on her waist, sending shivers through her entire body. "Tell me you haven't thought about me. Tell me that when Cunningham touches you, you don't wish it were my hands instead." "This is madness." Her voice was barely audible. "You're the Prince of Wales. I'm nobody, and I'm engaged." "You're not nobody." He spun her expertly, their bodies moving together as if they'd been dancing for years. "You're the woman who looked at me in that forest and saw just a man. Do you know how rare that is, how precious?" His hand tightened on her waist. "And Cunningham is wrong for you. I could see it in your eyes, in the way you flinch when he touches you. It doesn't matter what's wrong or right. It's done. Nothing is done until you speak vows in a church." The waltz brought them close again, his lips near her ear. "Has he kissed you?" The question was so unexpected, so intimate, that Helena stumbled. Edward's arm kept her upright, steadying her against his chest for just a moment, long enough for her to feel his heart pounding as hard as hers. "That's none of your concern." "Has he?" The question was more insistent now, almost desperate. "Once, as is his right as my betrothed." "And?" Edward's eyes were burning into hers. "And it was dutiful, proper, like sealing a business contract." The words felt like betrayal, but she couldn't lie to him, didn't want to lie to him. "When I kiss you, and I will kiss you, Helena, there will be nothing dutiful or proper about it." His voice was rough, sending heat pooling low in her belly. "You'll know the difference between a man who wants you as property and a man who wants you as heir." The waltz was ending. Too soon, much too soon. As the final notes faded, Edward kept her hand in his, raising it to his lips. But instead of the formal kiss to her glove that protocol demanded, he turned her hand over and pressed his mouth to the inside of her wrist, where her pulse hammered wildly against his lips. "Until next time, Lady Helena." His eyes promised that there would be a next time, many next times. He walked away, and Helena stood frozen on the dance floor, aware of hundreds of eyes on her, of the whispers already starting. Cunningham appeared at her elbow, his face thunderous. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing improper, my lord." The lie came easier than it should have. "See that it stays that way. I won't have my future wife connected with scandal. The prince has a reputation, and you will not become another of his conquests." His fingers dug into her arm hard enough to bruise. "Do you understand me?" "Yes, my lord." But as Cunningham dragged her away from the dance floor, Helena's wrist still burned where Edward's lips had touched, and she knew, with terrifying certainty, that she was already lost. The book arrived 2 days later, delivered to the Ashford townhouse by royal messenger in a package wrapped in simple brown paper. Helena's hands shook as she opened it in the privacy of her bedroom. Inside was a first edition of Pride and Prejudice. She'd mentioned loving Jane Austen in that forest, in what felt like another lifetime. And tucked between the pages was a note in bold, masculine handwriting. "For the woman who deserves to marry for love, not obligation. Elizabeth Bennet would never have settled for Mr. Collins. Neither should you. E." Helena pressed the note to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. She should return it, should burn it, should do anything except what she actually did, which was read it over and over until she had every word memorized. The gifts kept coming. A rare botanical print of wild roses. She'd mentioned loving gardening. A leather-bound journal with blank pages. "For thoughts that deserve freedom," his note said. Each one showed that he'd listened to her, remembered her, cared about the things that mattered to her, and with each gift, the tension grew. She saw him at the opera, his eyes fixed on her across the theatre, while some vapid debutante chattered beside him. At a garden party, where he managed to maneuver himself next to her during tea, his thigh pressing against hers under the table, in a touch that made her nearly drop her cup. At church, of all places, where his gaze on her during the sermon felt more intimate than any touch. Cunningham noticed. How could he not? He began restricting her movements, insisting she leave social events early, demanding she account for every moment of her day. The wedding date was moved up, just 6 weeks now. Helena felt the walls closing in. It was at the Duchess of Marlborough's ball that everything finally broke. Helena arrived with her father and Cunningham, exhausted from another day of wedding preparations that felt like planning her own funeral. The ballroom was suffocatingly hot, packed with London's elite, and she found herself desperate for air. She slipped onto one of the terraces, breathing deeply of the cool night air. The stars were bright above London, and for a moment she let herself imagine being anywhere else, anyone else, running away or just hiding. Edward's voice came from the shadows. Helena spun. He emerged from the darkness like something conjured from her desperate thoughts, still in formal evening wear but dishevelled now, his cravat loosened, his hair mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "How did you know I was here?" Because I've been watching you all night. Because I always know where you are. He moved closer, and she saw the hunger in his eyes. Because I can't stop watching you, thinking about you, wanting you. Edward, please, say it again. My name. I've been dreaming of how it sounds in your voice. This can't happen. But she didn't move away when he came closer. You're the crown prince. I'm engaged. This is impossible. I don't care. He was close enough now that she could feel his breath on her face. Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me that when you're alone at night you don't think about me. Tell me you're happy with Cunningham, and I'll walk away. The words stuck in her throat. She couldn't lie. Not to him. Not when he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. That's what I thought. His hand came up, cupping her cheek with devastating gentleness. I'm going to kiss you now, Helena. And if you don't want this, if you want me to stop, say so. But God help me, I need to taste you just once, just to know. She should have said no, should have run, should have remembered duty and obligation and all the reasons this was wrong. But when his mouth lowered to hers, all she could do was rise up to meet him. The kiss was nothing like Cunningham's dry, perfunctory claiming. This was fire and desperation and raw need. Edward's hand tangled in her hair, destroying her careful coiffure, his other arm wrapping around her waist and pulling her against him. Helena gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it. She kissed him back with abandon, her hands fisting in his jacket, pulling him closer. Years of repression, of being told to be proper and quiet and good, shattered under the onslaught of sensation. Edward kissed like a man starving, like she was water in a desert, like nothing else in the world existed except the two of them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Edward rested his forehead against hers. "You're mine," he whispered, the words rough and possessive. "You were always mine. From the moment I saw you in that forest, everything in me recognized everything in you." Edward. His name broke on a sob. "I know." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "I know it's complicated. I know there are obstacles, but I promise you, Helena, I will find a way. I'm not letting you marry Cunningham. I'm not losing you." "How? You're the prince. You can't just watch me." He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. "I've spent my entire life being told what I can and can't do, what I should want, who I should marry, and I've refused them all because none of them made me feel alive." His hands framed her face, his eyes boring into hers. "You make me feel alive, Helena. You make me want to be better, stronger, to actually deserve the throne I'll inherit someday. Lady Helena," her father's voice, distant but approaching. "Are you out here?" They sprang apart. Edward stepped back into the shadows, but his eyes never left her. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Not even close." Helena smoothed her dress, tried to fix her hair with trembling hands. "It has to be." "No." The single word was absolute. "It doesn't. And in your heart, you know that as well as I do." He disappeared into the darkness, just as her father emerged onto the terrace. "There you are. Cunningham is looking for you. Come inside." Helena followed, but every step felt wrong. Everything felt wrong now, except the memory of Edward's hands on her, his mouth on hers, the promise in his voice. She belonged to him now, and God helped them both. She didn't want it any other way. The summons from Queen Adelaide came 3 days later, delivered by royal courier with a seal that made Helena's hands shake. She was to present herself at Buckingham Palace the following morning, alone. No explanation given, but none needed. The Queen knew. Someone had seen them on that terrace, or noticed Edward's attention, or simply put the pieces together. Helena dressed with extra care, choosing a modest day dress in pale blue, pinning her hair in the most conservative style she could manage. She looked like someone respectable, someone worthy of appearing before royalty, someone who definitely hadn't been passionately kissing the heir to the throne 3 nights ago. The palace was as imposing as she'd feared, all marble and gilt and silent servants who looked through her as if she were invisible. She was led through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past paintings of monarchs who'd ruled England for centuries, until finally stopping before an ornate door. "Her Majesty will see you now." The room beyond was smaller than expected, a private sitting room rather than a throne room. Queen Adelaide sat by the window, 72 years old and still formidable, her eyes sharp as she examined Helena from head to toe. "Sit, girl." It wasn't a request. Helena sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Everything her governesses had taught her about proper deportment came flooding back. "Do you know why you're here?" "I believe so, Your Majesty." Then save us both time and tell me what my grandson means to you. The direct question was like a slap. Helena had prepared careful denials, diplomatic evasions, but looking into those shrewd eyes, she knew lies would only make things worse. I love him. The words came out quietly, but clearly. I never meant to. I tried not to, but I do. And he loves you? He says he does, Your Majesty. The Queen was silent for a long moment, studying Helena's face. Edward is my favorite grandchild, though I'd never say so publicly. He has his grandfather's fire and my late husband's intelligence. But he also has their stubborn nature, their tendency to become obsessed with what they cannot have. She set down her teacup with careful precision. Do you understand what you've done? Your Majesty, You've made yourself the one thing he wants most in the world, and when Edward wants something, he is relentless. He's refused every suitable match I've presented because none of them interested him. And now I understand why. He was waiting for you. The Queen's voice wasn't unkind, but it was absolutely firm, and I cannot allow this. Helena's heart sank. I understand. Do you? Do you understand that Edward must marry politically, that his wife must bring alliances, strengthen the crown, solidify England's position? The Queen leaned forward. You bring nothing but a bankrupt father and an inconvenient scandal. You are promised to Lord Cunningham, a match that serves England's industrial interests. Breaking that betrothal would cause significant economic complications. Then I'll marry Cunningham as planned. Each word felt like swallowing glass. I'll stay away from the prince. Will you? Can you? The Queen's eyes were penetrating, because I've seen the way you look at him. And more importantly, I've seen the way he looks at you like you're the sun and he's been living in darkness. Tears burned in Helena's eyes, but she blinked them back. What would Your Majesty have me do? Leave London. Go to your family's estate in the country. Stay there until your wedding. Cunningham is agreeable to a quiet ceremony away from society. I've already spoken with your father. He understands the necessity. The Queen's voice softened slightly. I don't do this to be cruel, child. I do this to protect both of you. Edward will rage and scheme, but eventually he'll understand. He'll marry appropriately. You'll marry Cunningham. And in time this passion will fade to a bittersweet memory. And if it doesn't, then you'll both learn to live with heartbreak. The Queen stood, and Helena immediately rose as well. That's what duty requires. I've lived with it. Edward's father lived with it, and you both will too. Helena curtsied deeply. Thank you for your time, Your Majesty. Helena. The Queen's voice stopped her at the door. For what it's worth, I think you would have made him happy. In another life, with different circumstances, you would have been exactly what he needed. She turned back to the window. But we don't live in that life, and we must make the best of the one we have. Helena left the palace in a daze. A carriage was waiting, not hers, but one bearing the Whitmore crest. Her father was inside, his face grave. Everything is arranged, he said as the carriage pulled away. We leave for the country estate tomorrow. The wedding will take place there in 4 weeks. Does Edward know? Her father's expression hardened. The prince will be informed through proper channels. Helena, you must understand. This is best for everyone. Best for our family. Best for the crown. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. In time you'll see I'm right. But as the carriage carried her away from the palace, away from Edward, Helena felt as if her heart was being carved from her chest. She'd known this was impossible. Had known from the beginning that a prince and an earl's impoverished daughter could never have a future together. Knowing didn't make losing him hurt any less. Helena spent the evening mechanically packing, her maid fluttering around her, chattering about the country estate and the upcoming wedding as if any of it mattered. She felt numb, moving through the motions of her life like a ghost. This time tomorrow she'd be miles from London, from Edward, forever. She was standing at her window looking out at the London night when she heard something impossible, a soft thud, then another, then cursing. She turned just as Edward hauled himself through her second-story window, dishevelled and breathing hard, bits of ivy clinging to his jacket. Have you lost your mind? Helena rushed to him, checking him for injuries, even as her heart soared at the sight of him. You could have broken your neck. Wouldn't be the first time I've climbed to a lady's window. He grinned, but there was desperation in his eyes, though usually the lady knows I'm coming. Edward, you can't be here. If anyone sees... I don't care. He grabbed her hands, holding them against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you're not leaving tomorrow. Tell me you're not really going to marry that bastard. Your grandmother... I know what my grandmother said. I know what my father said. I know what everyone is saying. He pulled her closer, his eyes burning. I want to know what you say. It doesn't matter what I say. The tears she'd been holding back all day finally spilled over. You're a prince, I'm nobody. This was always going to end like this. You're not nobody. His thumbs wiped away her tears with heartbreaking gentleness. You're everything. You're the woman I've been waiting for my entire life without knowing I was waiting. Edward, let me finish. He took a shuddering breath. I've spent 28 years refusing to care about anything, refusing to let anyone matter, because I knew that being who I am meant I'd never be free to choose for myself. But then I found you in that forest, and suddenly I understood why I'd been refusing everyone else. Because none of them were you. That doesn't change reality. Fuck reality. The curse was so unexpected from a prince that Helena actually gasped. Fuck duty and obligation and what everyone expects. Fuck my grandmother's political calculations and your father's debts and Cunningham's ambitions. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I want you, Helena. Not because you're convenient or appropriate or advantageous, because when I'm with you, I'm not the crown prince. I'm just Edward, and just Edward is completely, desperately, hopelessly in love with you. Don't! She tried to pull away, but he held her fast. Don't make this harder than it already is. I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be. He kissed her forehead, her temples, the tears on her cheeks. Because I'm not giving you up. I'm not watching you marry another man. I'm not spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. What choice do we have? Helena's voice broke. You heard your grandmother. I have nothing to offer you. No connections, no alliances, no fortune. Just debt and scandal and love, he interrupted. You offer me love, real love. The kind that doesn't care about crowns or protocol. The kind that sees me for who I am, not what I represent. His hands slid down to her waist, pulling her against him. That's worth more than all the political alliances in the world. Your grandmother won't see it that way. Then I'll make her see it. He rested his forehead against hers. Give me time, Helena. 1 month. Let me find a solution that doesn't require either of us to sacrifice everything. And if you can't, then we'll face that when it comes. But I won't face it without trying. He tilted her chin up. Do you love me? Truly? She should lie, should say no, should make it easier for both of them to walk away. But looking into his eyes, remembering how alive she felt in his arms, Helena couldn't do it. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. God help me. Yes. The kiss was devastating, slow and deep and filled with all the desperation they both felt. Edward's hands roamed her back, pulling her impossibly closer, and Helena let herself sink into it. Let herself have this one moment of honesty, of wanting, of choosing herself over duty. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Edward pressed something into her hand. A key. What's this? To my private apartments at St. James's Palace. If you need me, when you need me, come there. No servants. No guards, no interruptions, just us. He kissed her again, quick and fierce. Don't go to the country tomorrow, please. Give me time to fix this. I have to go. If I don't, my father will face consequences, I know. Edward's jaw clenched. Cunningham is threatening to call in the debts immediately if the wedding is delayed. I've already had it investigated. But Helena, I swear to you, I will find a way to free you from this. Both of you. How? I don't know yet. He smiled, but it was fierce, almost feral. But I'm the Crown Prince of England. If I can't protect the woman I love from a jumped-up industrialist, I don't deserve the title. He kissed her one more time, then moved toward the window. I'll write to you. Find a way to visit. This isn't goodbye. Be careful climbing down. Always am. He paused, one leg already out the window. Helena, when you're Lady Cunningham, in his house, in his bed, his voice roughed with emotion, remember tonight. Remember that you're mine first, that you'll always be mine. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness the same way he'd arrived, leaving Helena standing alone with a key clutched in her hand and tears streaming down her face. She was leaving tomorrow. She was marrying Cunningham in 4 weeks. She was losing everything that mattered. But God, she loved him, and that made it so much worse. The country estate was beautiful in its desolation, all rolling hills and ancient oak trees, a grey stone manor that had been in the Ashford family for 2 centuries. Helena hated every inch of it. It felt like a prison dressed in autumn colours, the walls closing in more each day as her wedding approached. 3 weeks now, 21 days until she became Lady Cunningham and lost herself forever. Edward's letters arrived daily, smuggled to her by a sympathetic stable boy who'd been well paid for his silence. She kept them hidden in a loose floorboard beneath her bed, reading them until she had every word memorized. He wrote of London without her, of how empty everything felt, of the investigation he'd launched into Cunningham's business dealings. He wrote of missing her, wanting her, counting the days until he could see her again. But he never wrote of a solution. And time was running out. Cunningham visited twice during those weeks, each visit making Helena's skin crawl more than the last. He was different here, away from London society's watchful eyes, more possessive, more cruel. He'd taken to touching her in ways that made her flinch, a hand too low on her back, fingers digging into her arm, once even trying to kiss her neck while her father was out of the room. "You'll learn to accept my affections," he'd said, his breath hot against her ear. "You'll learn to accept many things, my dear. A wife must be biddable, obedient. I intend to ensure you understand your proper place." The second visit was worse. He'd caught her reading, Byron of all things, poetry that made her heart ache, and snatched the book from her hands. "This is the problem with educated women," he sneered. "Always thinking, always questioning. After we're married, I'll decide what you read, what you wear, who you speak to." He stepped closer, backing her against the library wall. "The Prince of Wales won't be sending you books anymore. In fact, you won't be receiving any correspondence I don't approve first. That's not—" His hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to bruise. "Don't contradict me. I paid a fortune for you, Helena, your father's debts, your family's reputation, all of it bought and paid for. You belong to me now." He'd kissed her then, brutal and punishing, his tongue forcing its way into her mouth while she struggled against him. When he finally released her, there was satisfaction in his eyes at her tears. "Learn to like it," he said pleasantly, smoothing his jacket. "Because whether you do or not, you'll be doing a great deal more of it soon. I intend to get an heir on you quickly. Can't have my wife thinking she has time for rebellious notions." After he left, Helena scrubbed her mouth until her lips bled. She wrote to Edward that night, the words pouring out in desperate, messy scrawls. Everything Cunningham had said, had done, had threatened. She ended the letter with a plea. "If you truly love me, find a way. Please, Edward, I can't do this. I won't survive it." His response came 2 days later, and even through paper and ink, she could feel his rage. "Pack a bag. Be ready. I'm coming for you." The night Edward arrived, a storm was tearing across the countryside, rain lashing against the windows, and thunder shaking the old manor's bones. Helena was awake, dressed, a small bag packed and hidden beneath her bed. She didn't know what Edward's plan was, didn't care. Anything was better than Cunningham's cold cruelty. The knock on her door was so soft, she almost missed it. She opened it to find Edward soaked to the skin, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes wild with something between fear and fury. "Helena!" He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner. I should never have let you leave London. You're here now." She was crying, couldn't seem to stop. "That's all that matters." He pulled back, his hands framing her face, and she saw the moment he noticed the bruises on her chin, faded now but still visible. His expression went absolutely murderous. "He did this. Edward, that bastard put his hands on you." His voice was deadly quiet, more terrifying than any shout. "I'll kill him. I'll actually kill him." "You can't." Helena grabbed his hands. "He's too powerful. He has too many connections. He'll destroy my father." "I don't care." The words exploded from him. "Do you understand what reading your letter did to me? Knowing he hurt you, touched you, threatened you, and I wasn't there to protect you?" He was shaking now, his whole body vibrating with barely contained violence. "I rode through the night to get here. Didn't stop, didn't sleep, because every moment you were with him was torture. I'm not with him now. I'm with you, and you'll stay with me." He kissed her desperately, all the fear and rage and love pouring out. "We're leaving. Tonight. I have horses waiting. We'll go to Scotland, get married there. Once you're my wife, Cunningham can't touch you. My father. We'll be protected. I've already arranged it. Cunningham's businesses are built on fraud and exploitation. I have enough evidence to destroy him utterly, and I've made sure the right people know it. If he tries to retaliate against your family, I'll bury him." Edward's eyes bore into hers. "But I need you to trust me, to choose me, to let me save you the only way I know how. By running away?" Helena shook her head. "Edward, if you marry me like this, secretly, scandalously, you'll lose everything. Your grandmother will never forgive you. Parliament won't accept me. You could lose your claim to the throne. Then I'll lose it." He said it so simply, so absolutely, that Helena's heart stopped. "Do you think I care about a crown if it means watching you suffer? Do you think any of it matters without you? You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in my life. He kissed her again, softer now but no less intense. I love you, Helena, more than duty, more than obligation, more than my own ambition, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Helena looked at him, this prince who'd risk everything for her, who'd ridden through a storm because she was in pain, who looked at her like she was worth more than a kingdom, and she made her choice. We can't run. Helena, listen to me. She took his hands. If we run, we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Your family will hate me. England will see you as weak, and Cunningham will still have power. She took a shaky breath. But if we fight him properly, if we expose him and break this betrothal legally, then we have a chance, a real chance. There's no time. Your wedding is in 10 days. Then we have 10 days to destroy him. Helena's voice was stronger now. You said you have evidence of his crimes? Yes, but then we use it, publicly. We make sure everyone knows what kind of man he really is, that he extorts desperate families, that he uses his wealth to buy people like property. She met Edward's eyes. And we make sure your grandmother understands that marrying me isn't a scandal. It's a prince protecting an innocent woman from a predator. Edward stared at her, something like awe dawning on his face. You're brilliant. I'm desperate. Helena smiled through her tears. And I'm done being powerless. I'm done letting men decide my fate. If I'm going to fight for us, I want to do it with my head held high. God, I love you. He kissed her again, and this time it was different. Not desperate escape, but partnership. Promise. We'll do it your way. Together. Together, Helena agreed. They spent the rest of the night planning, Edward's arms around her as they worked through every detail. By the time dawn broke, they had a strategy. Dangerous, audacious, and possibly doomed to fail, but it was theirs. 4 days later, London society was shocked when William Cunningham was summoned before a special committee of Parliament to answer questions about labour practices at his factories. The evidence was damning. Children working 18-hour days, dangerous conditions, wages so low his workers couldn't afford food. One factory had collapsed just months before, killing 12 people, and Cunningham had paid off investigators to rule it an accident rather than negligence. The newspapers, carefully fed information by Edward's allies, ran with the story. Cunningham's reputation, already shaky among old money who considered him an upstart, crumbled. Business partners began distancing themselves. The Queen herself publicly expressed concern about the allegations, but Cunningham wasn't defeated yet. He called in the Earl of Whitmore's debts, demanding immediate payment. When Helena's father couldn't pay, Cunningham made a new offer. Drop all charges, kill the investigation, and he'd not only forgive the debts, but make sure the Ashford family was destroyed so thoroughly they'd never recover. Helena's father, terrified and weak, agreed. He wrote to Helena ordering her to prepare for the wedding as planned. The ceremony would take place in 3 days, scandal or no scandal. Helena burned the letter and wrote her own. To Edward, to his grandmother, to Parliament, and most importantly, to every newspaper in London. She told the truth about her father's gambling, about Cunningham's threats, about how she'd been sold like cattle to save her family from ruin. She wrote about the bruises on her chin, the threats, the abuse. And she wrote about Edward, about how he'd tried to protect her, about how he loved her despite every obstacle, about how she loved him in return. I am writing this, her letter concluded, because I have learned something important, that being powerless is a choice, that staying silent is a choice. And I choose differently. I choose truth over propriety. I choose love over obligation, and I choose to fight for my own future, whatever the cost. The letters were published the same day, creating a firestorm. London society was scandalized, delighted, horrified, and captivated all at once. The Earl's daughter, publicly defying her father and her betrothed, the Crown Prince openly pursuing an engaged woman, the industrial titan, exposed as a brute who bought and bullied. It was the scandal of the decade. The showdown came at the Queen's summons, 3 days before the scheduled wedding. Helena, Edward, Cunningham, and the Earl of Whitmore were all called to Buckingham Palace. Helena dressed carefully, not in demure pastels, but in deep green silk that made her look strong, regal. She pinned her hair up severely, covered the bruises with powder, and walked into the palace with her head high. Cunningham and her father were already there, both looking furious. Edward stood near his grandmother, his face carefully blank, but when he saw Helena, something blazed in his eyes. Pride, love, admiration. This situation, the Queen said without preamble, has become untenable. Lord Cunningham, you stand accused of serious crimes. Earl Whitmore, your daughter has publicly humiliated your family. Your Royal Highness, you've caused a scandal that threatens the dignity of the crown. She looked at each of them in turn. And, Lady Helena, you've managed to make yourself the most talked-about woman in England. Your Majesty, Cunningham began, his voice oily. The girl is clearly hysterical. Her accusations are wild exaggerations. Are they? The Queen's voice was icy. Because I've reviewed the evidence myself, the factory collapse, the labor violations, the financial manipulation, and this. She held up a document, a sworn statement from 3 different witnesses who saw you assault Lady Helena, saw you threaten her, heard you boast about owning her. Cunningham paled. They're lying, all of them, including a Viscountess and 2 members of Parliament? The Queen set down the document. I think not. And even if they were, your business practices alone are enough to warrant criminal charges. Then arrest me. Cunningham's composure was cracking. But I still own the Earl's debts. If Lady Helena doesn't marry me, I'll see her father ruined. Actually, Edward spoke for the first time, his voice calm but laced with steel, you won't, because as of this morning, I've purchased all of the Earl's debts, from you and from every other creditor. They're now held by the Crown. The room went silent. Helena's father looked shocked. Cunningham looked apoplectic. You can't. That's not. I can, and I have. Edward moved to stand beside Helena, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. The Earl of Whitmore's debts are forgiven, contingent on his cooperation with the ongoing investigation into your business practices, Lord Cunningham. As for Lady Helena, she is free of her betrothal to you, effective immediately. Your Majesty! Cunningham turned to the Queen desperately. You can't allow this. The Prince is protecting an innocent woman from a predator. The Queen interrupted, which, contrary to what you might believe, is exactly what a prince should do. She stood, and everyone immediately did the same. Lord Cunningham, you are to leave this palace immediately. Any further contact with Lady Helena or her family will be considered harassment and dealt with accordingly. Earl Whitmore, you're dismissed. Your Majesty expects better judgment from her nobles in the future. Cunningham looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at the Queen's face killed the words in his throat. He stormed out, the Earl hurrying after him. Helena's father didn't even look at her as he left. When the door closed, the Queen turned her formidable gaze on Helena and Edward. Well, that was quite a performance. Grandmother, Edward began. I'm not finished. The Queen moved closer to Helena, studying her with those sharp eyes. You've caused quite a lot of trouble, young lady. Yes, Your Majesty. I'm sorry. Are you? The Queen's expression was unreadable. Because you don't look sorry. You look defiant, determined, rather like someone who's discovered her own strength and has no intention of giving it up. Helena met her gaze steadily. Would Your Majesty prefer I lie? To everyone's shock, the Queen laughed. No, I wouldn't. I've had enough of people lying to me this week. She glanced at Edward, including my grandson, who somehow managed to redirect half the royal treasury to purchase debts without my knowledge. I did what was necessary to protect the woman I love. Yes, you did, and in the process you've made it politically impossible for me to oppose this match. The Queen's tone was dry. Well played, both of you. Though I suspect Lady Helena had more to do with the strategy than you did, Edward. She did, Edward admitted, pride evident in his voice. She's brilliant. Yes, well, brilliance is all well and good, but can she survive what comes next? The Queen addressed Helena directly. Make no mistake, child. If you marry my grandson, your life will not be easy. Half of society will despise you for marrying above your station. The other half will scrutinize your every move, waiting for you to fail. You'll be criticized, mocked, and judged more harshly than any woman before you. I know, Your Majesty. Do you? Do you truly understand what you're accepting? Helena thought of Cunningham's cruelty, of being powerless, of spending her life as property. Then she looked at Edward, at the man who'd climbed through her window, who'd ridden through storms, who'd risked his crown because he believed she was worth it. Yes, she said firmly, I understand perfectly, and I accept it gladly. The Queen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, but I have conditions. You'll undergo 6 months of intensive preparation for royal life, etiquette, protocol, diplomacy, everything required of a future princess. You'll be tested at every turn. If you fail, the engagement is off. I won't fail. See that you don't. The Queen moved toward the door, then paused. Edward, a moment alone with your fiancé. Edward bowed as his grandmother left, then immediately pulled Helena into his arms. "We did it. We actually did it. Your grandmother still doesn't approve." "She will, she's already coming around, I can tell." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her mouth. "You were magnificent. The way you stood up to her, to Cunningham, to everyone. I've never been more proud. I was terrified. You were perfect." He held her close, and Helena let herself sink into his embrace, let herself believe that maybe, impossibly, they were going to survive this. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months of proving myself. 6 months of making them understand what I already know. Edward tilted her chin up. "That you're extraordinary, that you're exactly what England needs, that you're exactly what I need. And if I'm not, if I can't, you will." He kissed her again, deep and sure. "Because you're the woman who threw herself from a horse rather than accept a cage, who wrote those letters knowing they'd cause a scandal, who stood before the Queen of England and didn't flinch. If anyone can survive what comes next, it's you." Helena wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. The next 6 months were the hardest of Helena's life. She was moved into apartments at Kensington Palace, close enough to see Edward regularly but separate enough to avoid scandal. Every day began at dawn with lessons, deportment, languages, history, protocol. She learned which fork to use at diplomatic dinners, how to curtsy to visiting dignitaries, how to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Her teachers were merciless. A sharp-tongued duchess who corrected her posture with a riding crop, a former ambassador who made her practice diplomatic conversations until she could navigate any awkward situation, a language tutor who insisted she become fluent in French, passable in German, and conversational in Italian. And through it all, Edward was there, stealing moments with her between lessons, sending encouraging notes when the Duchess was particularly brutal, making her laugh when the pressure felt unbearable. He was her anchor, her refuge, the reason she pushed through exhaustion and self-doubt. But being so close and yet so separate was torture. They could meet, but always with chaperones, could touch, but never more than was proper. Every goodbye was agony. It was 3 months into her training when everything nearly fell apart. A diplomatic reception, her first major test. Helena was to be presented to visiting dignitaries, to prove she could represent England with grace and intelligence. She'd prepared for weeks, memorizing names and titles, practicing her French until it was nearly perfect. Then Edward arrived with Lady Caroline Hartley on his arm. The Queen had insisted. Caroline was a duchess, a widow, and a family friend who'd be helping with the reception. Completely proper, completely reasonable, completely devastating. Helena watched them together, Caroline beautiful and poised in burgundy silk, her hand resting on Edward's arm with easy familiarity. Watched them laugh together, dance together, Caroline leaning close to whisper something that made Edward smile. And the jealousy that ripped through Helena was so intense she could barely breathe. This was her future. Watching other women touch him, smile at him. Women who were everything Helena wasn't, born to this world, comfortable in it, appropriate matches in ways she'd never be. "You look pale, my dear." An elderly countess appeared at her elbow. "First reception can be overwhelming. Perhaps some air." Helena nodded mutely, letting herself be led to a balcony. The cool night air helped, but not enough. Not when she could still see Edward and Caroline through the glass, looking like they belonged together. "He doesn't want her, you know." The countess's voice was kind. "I've known that boy since he was in leading strings. He's never looked at anyone the way he looks at you." "Then why?" "Because his grandmother is testing both of you. She wants to see if you'll crumble under pressure, if he'll stray when tempted. It's cruel, but it's necessary. The woman who marries the crown prince must be strong enough to survive far worse than a pretty widow batting her eyelashes." Helena watched Edward extricate himself from Caroline and begin searching the crowd, looking for her. When their eyes met across the ballroom, the relief on his face was palpable. "See?" The countess patted her hand. "He's already trying to find you. That boy is besotted. Don't give him up because of a little jealousy." "It's not little." Helena's voice was raw. "Every time I see him with someone else, I feel like I'm dying." "Good, that means you love him properly, passionately, the way royals should love, even if they rarely do." The countess smiled. "Now go back in there and show Caroline Hartley exactly who Edward belongs to." Helena straightened her spine, fixed her hair, and walked back into the ballroom. She navigated through the crowd with the grace her teachers had drilled into her, accepted introductions with perfect courtesy, and made herself absolutely charming to the visiting ambassadors. And when Edward finally reached her side, she smiled up at him brilliantly and said, loudly enough for Caroline to hear. "Your Royal Highness, I was just telling the French ambassador about your proposal. He was quite moved by your devotion." The possessiveness in her voice was clear. The message to Caroline even clearer. "He's mine." Edward's eyes blazed with understanding and desire. He took her hand, raised it to his lips, and held her gaze as he said, "Not as moved as I was by your acceptance, my love." Caroline's expression soured. The Queen, watching from across the room, looked almost impressed. The final test came at month 6, a formal dinner with Parliament's most influential members. Helena was to demonstrate she could handle political discussions, could represent the crown, could be trusted with England's secrets and dignity. One misstep would end everything. She wore deep blue silk, diamonds at her throat, a gift from Edward that had once belonged to his mother. Her hair was arranged in the elaborate style currently fashionable. She looked every inch a princess. The dinner was brutal. Parliamentary members who opposed her marriage asked pointed questions about her family, her education, her opinions on matters women typically avoided. They were trying to make her fail, to prove she wasn't worthy. Helena held her ground. When asked about her father's gambling, she acknowledged it honestly and explained the lessons she'd learned about responsibility. When questioned about her sudden engagement, she spoke eloquently about love and partnership, and the strength it took to choose one's own fate. When a particularly hostile lord asked what she could possibly bring to the royal family, she looked him in the eye and said, "Myself, my lord, my intelligence, my determination, my absolute devotion to England and to the prince who will someday be its king. I may not have been born to this life, but I choose it now with full knowledge of its challenges, and I intend to prove every single day that I was worth his choice and yours." The room went silent. Then, slowly, the Queen began to applaud. One by one, the others joined in, grudgingly at first, then with genuine respect. Helena had won. The wedding was planned for the following month, a full royal ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The Queen herself helped with preparations, softening toward Helena in ways that surprised everyone. "You've proven yourself, child," she said one afternoon while reviewing seating charts. "Not just to me, but to England. You've shown strength, grace, and intelligence." Edward chose well. The night before the wedding, Edward climbed through Helena's window one last time. A tradition now, this improper late-night visit. She laughed as he tumbled onto her bed, disheveled and grinning. "Couldn't stay away," she teased. "Never could, never will." He pulled her into his arms, serious now. "Tomorrow you become my wife, my princess. Eventually, my queen. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the moment I met you in that forest." She kissed him softly, though I didn't know it then. "I did. I knew you'd change everything. That's why I was so terrified of you." His hands traced her face like he was memorizing it. "Do you know what you've given me? A reason to be better. To actually want the throne I'll inherit. To believe I can make a difference. You always could have. Not without you." He kissed her deeply, pouring all his love into it. "Tomorrow is just the beginning, Helena. We'll have a lifetime together. Children, challenges, adventures. An entire future that's ours to build. I can't wait." Helena smiled through happy tears, "though I'll miss these improper visits." "Who says they have to end? I'm the Crown Prince. If I want to climb through my wife's window occasionally, who's going to stop me?" He grinned wickedly. "Some traditions are worth keeping." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, breaking a dozen rules about propriety, neither of them caring. Tomorrow they'd face the world. Tonight they were just Edward and Helena, two people who'd fought impossible odds to be together, and they'd won. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, London coming alive with celebration. The streets were packed with commoners eager to see the prince and his controversial bride. Newspapers ran stories about their love, their struggle, their triumph. Helena had captured the public's imagination in a way no royal bride had in decades, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. Helena stood in her dressing room at Kensington Palace, staring at herself in the mirror. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece, ivory silk embroidered with gold thread, a train that would require 6 attendants to carry. The Queen's own tiara sat on her head, a symbol of acceptance that made Helena want to cry. "You look beautiful," her father said from the doorway. He'd been subdued since the confrontation at the palace, shamed by his role in nearly destroying his daughter. "Helena, I'm sorry. For everything. I should have protected you. You did what you thought you had to do. We all did." She turned to face him. "But it's over now. We're free of it. The debts, the fear, all of it. We get to start over. Because of your prince." Because we fought for each other. Helena adjusted her veil. Are you ready to walk me down the aisle? More ready than I've ever been for anything. He offered his arm. Let's go get you married. The carriage ride to Westminster Abbey was surreal. Crowds cheering, throwing flowers, chanting Edward's name and hers. Helena waved, smiled, felt her heart nearly burst with joy and disbelief. This was real. This was happening. Inside the Abbey, the ceremony was a blur of ritual and splendor. Hundreds of guests, organ music that shook the ancient stones, light streaming through stained glass windows in rainbow colors. But Helena only saw Edward, waiting for her at the altar in full military dress, looking at her like she hung the moon and stars. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're so beautiful, I can't breathe." "Good thing we're about to take vows then," she whispered back. "Breathing is overrated." The Archbishop began the ceremony, but Helena barely heard the words. She was too focused on Edward's hands holding hers, on the tears she could see he was fighting back, on the absolute certainty in his eyes. "I, Edward Albert, take thee, Helena Elizabeth, to be my wedded wife. I, Helena Elizabeth, take thee, Edward Albert, to be my wedded husband." When they exchanged rings, Edward's hands were shaking. When the Archbishop pronounced them husband and wife, he pulled her into his arms before anyone could stop him and kissed her with a passion that made the congregation gasp and then cheer. "My wife," he murmured against her lips. "My princess. My everything. My husband," she answered. "My prince. My love." They walked back down the aisle together to thunderous applause, but Helena barely noticed. She was too focused on Edward's hand in hers, on the future stretching before them, bright and limitless. The reception at Buckingham Palace was magnificent. Hundreds of guests, endless toasts, dancing that went on for hours. But the moment Helena treasured most was when Edward led her onto the balcony overlooking the palace courtyard, where thousands of people had gathered to celebrate. "They want to see you," he said, gesturing to the crowd. "Their princess." Helena stepped forward, Edward's arm around her waist, and the crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, chants of, "God save the prince and princess." She waved, overwhelmed, and felt Edward pull her closer. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, "right here in front of God and England and everyone who said we couldn't have this. That's not very proper, Your Royal Highness. I've never cared much for proper, and neither have you." He turned her toward him, his eyes soft with love. "Ready to scandalize them one more time?" "Always." The kiss was tender and deep, and absolutely inappropriate for a public appearance. The traditionalists would talk about it for years, but the crowd loved it, cheering louder than ever. When they finally pulled apart, Edward rested his forehead against hers. "We're free," he whispered. "For the first time in our lives, we're completely free. Free to love each other. Free to be ourselves. Free to build the life we want." Helena smiled through happy tears. Was it worth it? All the fighting, the scandal, the struggle. Every second. He kissed her again, quick and fierce. "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. You're worth everything, Helena, you always were." They stood on that balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, waving to the crowd that loved them. And Helena thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, resigned to a loveless marriage, believing she had no choice, no power, no voice. That woman was gone. In her place stood a princess who'd fought for her own future, who'd chosen love over duty, courage over fear, herself over expectation. She'd lost nothing and gained everything. Years later, Helena would stand in that same palace holding their first child, watching Edward address Parliament about reforms that would change England forever. She'd think about the forest where they met, the scandal that nearly destroyed them, the fight that made them stronger, and she'd remember what Edward had said on their wedding night, when they were finally alone. "This is just the beginning. We have a lifetime to love each other, to change the world together, to prove that choosing with your heart doesn't make you weak, it makes you unstoppable." He'd been right. They were unstoppable. Together they always had been. The Crown Prince had wanted one thing, the Earl's daughter, promised to another. And in the end, dangerous as a lion, relentless as fate, devoted as only true love can be, he'd gotten exactly what he wanted. Her, forever.